All right. Hello everyone, and welcome to the third and final episode of The Eighth Nerve. I'm Ella Rohrhoff. I'm in 10th grade, as you know by now. In the last episode, I talked to Dr. Welch from the University of Michigan, where he did a great job explaining kind of the basics of regenerative medicine, just kind of, dumbed it down for all of us to understand. Before we begin the third episode, I do have to mention that this podcast is just for informational and entertainment purposes. The content I offer is not professional medical advice, and it should not be used to replace the input of a licensed physician or of another qualified healthcare professional. Please use the information provided in this podcast to your own discretion. Continuing on from that, in today's episode, we will be exploring some ways that someone like you, the listener, can get involved to help the research of regenerative medicine. We will speak to a representative from a program, the National Hearing and Balance Organ Donor Program, who will explain to us the importance of their program and how it, contributes to the future of regenerative medicine. This organization specifically focuses on balance and hearing, which directly correlates with the nerves that my dad damaged during his brain surgery, which we really explored in episode 1. So can everyone please welcome Dr. Valerie Estela-Pro.
Hello.
So can you please begin by telling us a little bit about yourself, like your job, your life, and your hobbies?
Absolutely. So my job is that I'm the director of external scientific affairs at NDRI. And before this, I did research. I studied specifically how stress affected learning and memory. And before that, I studied how the brain encodes spatial research. About me, I like to play ultimate frisbee. I have 3 cats and I like crafting, like knitting and crocheting.
That's fun. So how did you initially become interested in the medical field?
Yeah. So I was always interested in being some kind of doctor, like a pediatrician. And then when I went to undergrad, I ended up really loving research. So I was able to do research on fish, and it was really interesting. I decided I wanted to keep going with that, and I've been doing research ever since.
All right. What is the history of the National Hearing and Balance Organ Donor Program?
Yeah, so back in the 1960s, Dr. Howard House first started the registry to collect human temporal bones for research. The temporal bone is the bone that houses the inner ear, also known as the cochlea. And it's really hard to access. So getting access to it for research has historically just been really difficult. A lot of people in the process of attempting to gain access to it will kind of destroy it or mess it up in a way that makes it difficult for the very fine things within to be studied correctly. So Dr. Howard House started teaching people how to and collecting temporal bones for research. And then in 1992, the National Institute on Communication and on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders it funded the establishment of the National Temporal Bone Hearing and Balance Pathology Resource Registry that was housed at the Massachusetts Eye and Ear Institute. We have NDRI in 2025, earlier this year, registry was transitioned to NDRI. And so now it is the National Hearing and Balance Organ Donor Program.
Those are some long names. Yes. So yeah, we kind of explored in the last episode just how intricate the inner ear is. So that is interesting, how recent, I guess, that the history of exploring the inner ear has been. So what are some of the major goals of the program?
Yeah, so by studying temporal bones from donors with different inner ear diseases, as well as temporal bones from donors with normal hearing and balance, the program aims to facilitate research and hopefully ultimately generate new knowledge into hearing, balance, facial nerve problems, as well as helping to develop different medical treatments and different options for people suffering from disorders.
Interesting. So how does the program operate? How does it work?
So essentially, we have a registry, and you can go to our website and find all the information about it. And when you sign up to join the registry, you are basically saying that you're going to tell your family that you're interested in donating to this program. And let your family know that whenever you pass away, could be months from now, it could be years from now, to reach out to us, and we would coordinate the collection of the temporal bones so that people doing this kind of research would be able to study them.
Are there a lot of researchers working to help the National Hearing and Balance Organ Donor Program?
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots of researchers. So right now, we currently have 5 partner labs. Each of those have several ongoing projects with various postdocs and graduate students and technicians. And then we also have several NIH program officials who oversee the program. And they're engaged in this, and they engage in their own research as well. So many researchers working together to help this program succeed.
So of course, with all of the help that you have, there are still challenges. So what would you say like the single biggest challenge is that the program faces today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think right now, one of the biggest challenges being faced in science in general, and for this program, is funding.
Right.
So the NIH budget, if you know, is still not decided for this next year. Fiscal year for the NIH starts in October. So for October of 2025 through September of 2026, we still don't have a budget. So until that happens, grants can't be funded. And right now, we've been relatively lucky since we do facilitate human research that our own funding is currently still intact. But a lot of our researchers are also facing funding issues. And if you're not funding the research, then the resource that
Right.
provides for it isn't very useful.
Right. So, how does this organization help people like my dad who have had hearing loss and balance issues?
Yeah, so hopefully the end result is the program facilitates treatment options and cures, but the reality is that this takes years of research. So,
Mm-hmm.
by providing these samples, by finding people with different disease states, right? Like collecting enough samples that you can actually find something different to look at the DNA and the history and
Mm-hmm.
all of the pieces and kind of see what the patterns are. It just takes a long time, especially for something so really complex.
Right.
Um, so by having this registry and creating the network of researchers, hopefully it'll facilitate the ability to make these
Yeah.
discoveries a bit faster.
So kind of going off of that, how does this program assist in the research of regenerative medicine specifically?
Yeah, so one of the major ways that researchers are hoping to help people with hearing loss is through regeneration of inner ear hair cells. So it sounds like maybe you've chatted about this a bit on the podcast
Yes.
already.
Uh-huh.
So you probably know then that damage to the hair cells is permanent in humans.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the ways that people are looking to help restore hearing, especially for people whose hearing is damaged due to the loss of hair cells, is to start helping regenerate them. And one of the main ways that you need to be able to facilitate seeing what kinds of drugs and treatments can help cells is to be able to regrow the cells. So you have
Mm-hmm.
to have access to the tissues that have particular diseases to be able to culture those cells and see what affects and what doesn't affect the outcome. So by providing the samples, we can see what might encourage regeneration using things from animal models that have regeneration. So lots of reptiles are actually able to regenerate their hair cells, and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of research is being done into how different compounds can be used therapeutically.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that about the reptiles. But yeah, we definitely discussed that on episode 2 about like how the hair cells like they don't just regrow like, like your normal hair would. So kind of something else. So like you did mention of course it is like the biological samples of course are very important and the funding is very important. So how can people donate to the program?
Yes. So if people are interested in donating their tissues to research, they can visit our website. Everything needed to learn how to register is included there. It's a pretty intensive registration process. There's a lot of consenting involved just to make sure that everybody fully understands what the research program is
Mm-hmm.
and what the process will look like. So there's lots of information available. But the main answer is if you're interested in donating, make sure that you make a plan and make sure that your next of kin know as well.
All right, what about like funding? Like can people just donate money to you guys?
We are a not for profit, but we don't typically do fundraising in this way. We appreciate it, but we actually suggest that you donate to fundraisers that are more specific to the diseases that you're trying to cure.
All right. What are the most common tissues requested by researchers right now, and what are they hoping to discover from them?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think right now, the most common tissues requested by researchers are probably brain tissues, nerves,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's probably because they have historically been the hardest to gain access to. And now that um, NDRI and others have started training recovery techs on how to more carefully brain tissue and how to dissect out particular regions, it makes it easier for researchers to access the particular samples they need. And so I think there are so many different types of research that are going on, though, even
Mm-hmm.
on brain tissue. There's lots of autoimmune disease things being looked at. We're facilitating a Lyme disease biobank as well. And then HIV is being looked at. There are tons of different diseases that are all so important and devastating. And it's
Yeah.
amazing that we're able to contribute to so many different great
Yeah.
projects.
So like how do you think this is kind of going off script here, but how do you think that those like other like how much of those of the samples being requested by researchers are like being used for regenerative medicine specifically?
Ooh, that's something that would be really difficult for me to know.
Mm-hmm.
We do, so part of our process for providing tissues to researchers is they do have to provide like a very long list of a bit of a laundry list of documents, their CV, explanations about their research, descriptions of their research, and then that goes through layers of external review and internal review to make sure that the people we're providing these samples to are doing peer reviewable research. And I am not actually the person who tends to go through those. So I don't
Yeah.
know the percentage, but I do know that it's definitely on the rise. I think people are really
Mm-hmm.
interested in regenerative medicine for many diseases and treatment options. Yeah.
How do contributions and donations from people help improve your program and therefore accelerate the research of regenerative medicine?
Yeah. Well, especially for this program, it fully relies on the
Yeah.
donations of people and on the word of mouth from people who are aware of the project to tell other people about it existing, to tell their doctors about it, so that people can like know that it exists to donate to.
Mm-hmm.
We have materials available to provide to doctors' offices so that people can receive information if they're interested in that. Yeah, I think,
Nice.
yeah.
So what are like a few of the most exciting potential breakthroughs or areas of research that you foresee happening in the next, 5 to 10 years, directly enabled by the tissue samples that your program provides?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, especially for this hearing imbalance program, I think huge strides are definitely going to be made in regenerative medicine. I think there are lots of people looking at how to re-stimulate hair cells, how to re-stimulate growth. There are lots of people looking at for vestibular action. There are lots of things happening on the calcium ion channel side that are really promising. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
huge strides are going to be made all over. And this program, it's great that the NIH is putting funding towards it and really facilitating research into it.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, kind of going off a different path, what steps does this program take to ensure the ethical and respectful handling of the donated tissues and to protect the privacy of the donors and of their families?
Yeah, that's a big question we get from a lot of the donors and their families because it is so important. We NDRI has been facilitating donations for over 40 years, so we have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of practices in place to make sure that everything is handled very respectfully and confidentially. So we have a specific software that we keep all of the patient information in. Everything that we provide to outside researchers is de-identified, and we make sure that all identifiable information is used only by approved researchers. All researchers that work with NDRI have to go through one process, and then if they're interested in getting tissues from this particular hearing imbalance program, they also have to go through another layer where the NIH group gets to approve researchers for this program as well. So many, many
Yeah.
steps are
Yeah.
involved in providing confidentiality and ensuring that all appropriate steps are taken.
So are there any financial costs or burdens placed upon the donor's family when they choose to participate in the program?
No, so NDRI manages all of the aspects of collecting the samples.
Mhm.
So we would coordinate with wherever the person would happen to be, whether that's a hospital or a funeral home, and we would be able to work with them to get a technician wherever we need to. And it would just be managed by NDRI. Yep.
Are there any other similar programs to the National Hearing and Balance Organ Donor Program, or are you guys kind of flying solo?
So there aren't any other programs that are collecting temporal bones, as far as I know. Like I said, though, we do have a couple of other programs that we manage where we're collecting multiple tissues for HIV donors, Lyme
Mm-hmm.
disease donors, and then we also have two other NIH consortia that we participate in, one looking at somatic mosaicism and one looking at developmental genotype and tissue expression. So there are a lot of projects out there all working towards creating databases and solving diseases. And we are lucky enough to get to participate in some of them.
So, what is one common misconception or fear that people have about organ or tissue donation for research that you would like to address and clarify for our listeners?
Yeah, that's one of the questions I was most looking forward to.
Yeah.
So, one misconception that people have is that when you are doing genetic analysis, people can kind of reverse figure out exactly who you are and use your DNA for nefarious purposes. And while that might be possible, it's pretty unlikely. And on top of that, these are, vetted researchers who are signing agreements to ensure that all confidentiality is
Right.
protected and really just have the best interest in mind looking for these cures and treatments. Um, and so I want to say, you know, there are a lot of things to be concerned about. Luckily, that doesn't have to be one of them.
What are some of the things to be concerned about?
Well, the main thing I would say is that even if you sign up to be an organ donor on your license, that doesn't automatically trigger organ donation.
Okay.
The most important thing, if you actually want to make sure that your organs are available for transplant and or research, is to make a plan with your next of kin. So your next of
Mhm.
kin is going to make all of the decisions for you at end of life, and making sure that they know what your wishes are the only way to ensure that you get to do what you're hoping to.
Gotcha. So this might be kind of like kind of a stupid question, but do you have to have like the organ donor thing on your license to be part of this program?
No, not at all.
Okay.
You don't have to have it on there to be approached for organ donation in general. And like I just said,
Okay.
it actually doesn't automatically do anything
Right.
anyway. But
Right.
yeah, so you can sign up for this whether you have it or not.
So what is the single most important message that you want our audience to take away about this program?
Yeah, I think the single most important message is that research is vitally important to society. Facilitating it, whether it's through donating your samples, your tissue samples, or by advocating for funding, is just really important and something that I do and I encourage you to do as well.
Yeah, I find it really interesting that you guys don't really take, like cash donations. I found that really, really interesting and nice. Yeah. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up the interview. I did kind of want to ask you though more about like how you got into regenerative medicine. Like I know we kind of had this question before, but I mean, I'm sorry, not regenerative medicine, into the program because how did you find this program in specific and like how did you decide that it's like what you wanted to like dedicate your life to?
Yeah, so this is actually just one program that I run. So I actually manage multiple programs.
Okay.
And this hearing and balance organ donor program is currently housed under a larger research resource grant that NDRI holds. So the research resource grant is funded by the NIH, and the point is to facilitate access to tissue samples from all body systems.
Okay.
The Hearing and Balance Organ Donation Program is one of those programs to facilitate access to specific tissues.
Right.
So it's kind of the situation of it wants to facilitate access to some, but this is a very special, like I said, difficult to access tissue. So it
Right.
needed a little bit of specific funding, and it requires the registry. So that is also managed by this. But I think the main question was, how did we get into this? And the answer is we are hoping to facilitate this kind of research into many different diseases for all body systems,
Uh-huh.
including hearing imbalance.
So yeah, you kind of just mentioned there how this one like requires the registry kind of because it's complicated. So do other ones
Mm-hmm.
not require the registry then?
Yeah, so there are many different programs that we run. So I mentioned the HIV program. So if somebody has HIV and they're registered, they don't have to be necessarily registered with us. They could be a patient at groups that we happen to be partners with, and then we can get donor offers. And that's
Mhm.
also similar for how the vast majority of our programs work. So the Hearing and Balance program, being a registry, is actually pretty unique for how we work. We tend to work through just the general transplant group. And when tissues can't go for transplant, they can sometimes be offered to us for research if donors have consented to research as well.
All right, so I just keep kind of coming up with more questions here. I'm
Please,
sorry.
yeah. No,
Um,
please.
so of course, this relates to my dad because his like inner ear was damaged, his nerves were damaged. How can you kind of like predict like do you think it'll take the regenerative medicine specifically for like the stuff relating to my dad that I just mentioned? Do you think it'll take longer for that to like be like available for the public as other types of regenerative medicine?
Yeah. I think that that type of research, especially for the inner ear, it's still pretty early.
Okay.
Unfortunately, as far as I know, no compounds have been identified that do stimulate regeneration for these cells. That would be
Mhm.
pretty major. That'd be pretty major news.
Right.
Um, so if that had been found running this program, I think I might happen to know. Um, so without that, I feel like it's still a while away because those compounds still need to go through many rounds of preclinical trials before we could
Right.
ever bring them to humans. Um, so it'll be a little while, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
facilitating the research at all is the first step.
Yes, so I did ask this question to Dr. Welch too, but I want to know, in your opinion, how long do you think it'll be before regenerative medicine like becomes available to the public for people with the issues that my dad had in his auditory nerve?
You know, it is hard to predict, and it does
Hmm.
feel like a lot of research progress has been kind of speeding up to some extent. We have a lot of groups
Okay.
working on a lot of the same things. So I feel like my initial gut reaction was maybe 20 years, but maybe it's closer to 15.
Okay.
Hopefully with access to resources like this, maybe we'll be able to speed it up a little bit.
Do you think so? I've noticed, as a student, that there's kind of been like a rise in people wanting to go into the medical field. A lot of my friends like are taking biology classes like extra, like chem, AP Bio, stuff like that. So do you think like the rise in like kind of like interest in the medical field, do you think that has to do with the speeding up of the process?
You know, what I think was actually speeding up the process was there were even so that's a great starting point, but in
Hmm.
order to get interest in those like
Right.
younger groups, you have to have the representation in the
Right.
graduate student population. You have to have the interest in those like pieces, and
Hmm.
that requires funding of graduate students and postdocs. So when you fund those early career scientists, that's how it kind of sparks interest in those like even earlier spots, right? That's how you get those
Right.
high school research opportunities, is by having graduate students to facilitate those.
Right.
So I think that they a lot of funding has been cut recently,
Right.
and I think we need to kind of get back to baseline
Yeah.
before we kind of fall off the horse.
So yeah, so kind of going off of that too. So you did, of course, the funding has been cut. Do you think also so actually okay, I have two questions. So do you think that will cause like cause people to not want to go into the medical field as much, possibly?
Well, I don't know about want to go in.
Right.
I definitely think it makes it less stable appearing. People who were considering graduate school might not be considering graduate school. I also know that many offers for graduate school were rescinded. Programs have paused admissions. Everybody's very nervous about funding.
Right.
So while I'm not sure it will curb enthusiasm, I think it will limit the number of opportunities that exist for people to do so. There could be a
Right.
ton of interest, but if there are only 5 positions, it doesn't matter how much interest there is.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, that makes sense. So, yeah, that kind of answered my second question, too. I was just gonna kind of ask a similar question. So, anyway, that is all the questions I have for you. Thank you so much for informing us about your program, or programs, I guess, but mostly the National Hearing and Balance Organ Donor Program. I really appreciate you coming on here and using your time to talk on the eighth nerve. So, thank you so much.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure being here.
So I'm just gonna kind of wrap up the episode real quick. So the final episode of the Eighth Nerve has come to a close. Listeners, I wish that you take away a new understanding of regenerative medicine and how it can possibly benefit so many people in the future with such a wide range of health problems. Well, hopefully in the near future, possibly in your lifetime. With the help of many hardworking doctors and researchers and amazing organizations such as the National Hearing and Balance Organ Donor Program, which we interviewed today. After listening to this podcast, if you have a few minutes, there is a link in the description of this episode to a survey where we can get feedback on the podcast. It would be really helpful for my project because I need to collect some data. It would be really nice because if we end up doing, another season or just updates as like the years go by on this podcast, we can get some feedback to kind of know how to improve. So once again, thank you, Dr. Estela-Pro, and thank you to our listeners for getting all the way through this podcast. I know it was a pretty long one. It was 3 episodes, but they were pretty hefty episodes packed with a lot of information. So I really appreciate you guys listening, and I really hope that one day I can make an episode saying like oh my gosh, this like something was discovered. Like I don't really know how to word it, but that would be really cool. If that would be a really cool full circle moment. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on here today, and thank you for listening.